I'm Pål Ulvik Rokseth, and I am on the Cinematography podcast.
The following podcast contains explicit language. You're listening to the Cinematography podcast presented by Hot Rod Cameras, a program about the art, craft, and philosophy of the moving image and the people who make it happen. Coming to you from the world headquarters of Hot Rod Cameras in Hollywood, California, are your hosts, Ben Rock and Ilya Friedman.
Hey there, Ben Rock.
Hey, Ilya, what's up?
Hey, it is time for another fine episode of the Cinematography podcast.
Hey, who do we have on the show?
We have Pål Ulvik Rokseth. He is the cinematographer behind The Lost Bus, which you can stream right now on Apple TV. It is completely worth seeing. It's fantastic. So Ben, diving right into our close focus.
And now, close focus.
What do we have to yak about this week?
Well, I came across an article in IndieWire that kind of blew my mind a little bit for several reasons. One Battle After Another, the new Paul Thomas Anderson movie, which was shot in VistaVision, right?
Shot on film, yeah.
Yes, not just shot on film, but shot on VistaVision. So for people who don't know what VistaVision is, it's kind of an antiquated format that's made a resurgence recently, wherein the 35 millimeter frame is pulled sideways through the gate, giving you a wider image. You know the exact dimensions. Why don't you tell us what they are?
It's about a 36 millimeter wide imaging area of frame that you're recording, unlike traditional 35 millimeter film where you're taking a smaller extraction from inside of that when it runs vertical. But the other way for our listeners to think about this is it's very, very similar to the format of full frame 35 millimeter still photo, or what you might get from like most sort of like modern DSLR cameras.
Yeah, and it's also what IMAX is to 70 millimeter, because IMAX is shot on 65 millimeter film that's pulled sideways. And so, you're getting a wider frame. I was, as a former 35 millimeter projectionist, a little surprised to learn that 35 millimeters wasn't the imaging size. It's the size of the entire frame, including sprocket holes and a soundtrack. So you're actually not getting nearly 35 millimeters of width. So before we started recording, you and I had a little argument, a little spat about that, because I'm like, no, it's got to be wider than that, because that's not 35 millimeter. 35 millimeters only giving you that, but 35 millimeters actually giving you less. When we talked to the DP of Poor Things,
he
had sort of pulled the VistaVision camera out of mothballs, and we're starting to see, like Lal Crawley shot The Brutalist on VistaVision, like it's starting to become kind of a thing. And it's cool because VistaVision kind of gives you an image size somewhere between 35 millimeter film and 70 millimeter film. It's like a little bit between those. It's kind of a halfway point between those, or it's maybe a little closer to 70 millimeter. But as you and I argued, and you were correct, and I was, of course, an idiot, we established that it's not the same, because I was like, isn't it about the same as a frame of 70 millimeter? Not quite.
It has the same sort of branding, though. So VistaVision had a lot of like hoopla and a lot of money put behind it. Paramount was a big proponent of VistaVision back in the day, and when there were these wars between the studios of trying to attract people to come to their theater to see their movies, one of the things they wanted to say was like, look, we're better because we used VistaVision, or we're better because we used 70, or we're better because we used anamorphic or CinemaScope or any
Cinerama.
Yes, all of these different things were designed to get you, dear consumer of movies, out of your seat and to go into that theater. And it continued, THX was a big thing for a while. DTS.
Sound makes so much more sense to me, honestly, because I remember as a child growing up, they would take movies that were shot in 35 and project them in 70, like that made any difference. And then later when I was in film school, I was like, oh, they're just optically printing it up. Like it's going to look like the same film. It's not going to change anything about it just because I'm watching it from a 70 millimeter print. But when you're filming it in 70 millimeter, the image quality is different. The optical properties of the lenses are different. The resolution is much higher, obviously, and that goes all the way up to IMAX. So this brings us back to the VistaVision situation with one battle after another, and something I did not realize, which was that there was a push with Warner Brothers to show the movie in VistaVision.
Which is interesting because there are theaters who can do that. Not many.
4 in the world.
Not many. But back in the heyday of VistaVision, one of the things they used to advertise was oversampling, essentially what is now known as oversampling, whereas they would say, well, it was shot in VistaVision, but we have sharper, higher quality release prints, even though they were smaller in standard size, because they started with that large negative. And there's a lot of truth to that. You actually get a cleaner reduction in size when you start with something big and then move to something small if it's downsampled properly. And you could make the same claim about IMAX or with digital projection for that matter. So if you acquired something in IMAX, you still get a huge amount of that quality, even if you're not showing it on IMAX film. I know there's people who will argue this, but for the most part, when you are actually talking about oversampling, you get a very, very high degree of the qualitative benefits, even if you're not looking at something on a one-to-one comparison. So like if you saw VistaVision printed down to standard 35 millimeter, it's still going to retain most of the qualities as if you were showing it natively in VistaVision. So yes, there might be a modest improvement in quality, but you still get most of the benefit from just the fact that you captured in that higher resolution, higher, larger negative format to begin with.
Yeah, and I mean, I can see the argument in both directions, honestly, because you are going to be seeing it in higher resolution. Like if you saw Oppenheimer in IMAX, which it was filmed in, you will see more details. But if you watch Oppenheimer on your television, or if you saw it as I did, I didn't see it in IMAX. I slummed it and only saw it in 70 millimeter.
Wah, wah.
Yeah. I didn't feel like going to Universal City Walk. That's the closest IMAX theater to me. But if you saw it in 70 millimeter, it's like, yes, you won't be getting all of the resolution, but the things you will be getting will be the dynamic range of it. You'll be getting the optical qualities of the lens. So when you get those IMAX close-ups, the way IMAX kind of reacts to a human face, all that good stuff. But this was, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, it's not like these things don't matter, but how much does it matter and how much does it matter to everyone? I'm not necessarily sure. Like I was involved in the really early tests of digital projection back when, the ETC Center was formed and there was a laboratory on Hollywood Boulevard to compare film and digital projection. And yes, at that time, film was clearly better. But how much better and how much would people notice? I think it's a little bit the same thing with like a VistaVision release. Yes, it's wonderful. Yes, you have the technology. You might as well take advantage of it. Same thing with a 70 millimeter release or an IMAX release. These things are all amazing. Just because you see it in a smaller format doesn't mean that you've lost all of the magic of it. It's just, there is something, I guess, that if you've got the resources, you might as well enjoy it the best way you can.
Well, I remember seeing just a few months ago Ryan Coogler doing a walkthrough of all the formats that Sinners was available in. And, he had to supervise because every one of those, they have to make changes and compromises and in some cases even change the framing. Like IMAX is going to be more of a square frame than, a widescreen release. And so, when you're making the film, you have to keep that in mind. How are we going to release it? And then when you release it, you have to basically go through and quality control each version of those things. But this was my biggest question about the VistaVision situation here is that, and we both looked this up. So, I was like, there's 4 theaters in the world. One of them's here in LA where you can watch a movie in VistaVision commercially. You can just go buy a ticket and watch it in VistaVision because it's just a projector nobody uses. And, or very few people use, and they've been, out of service in that regard. So VistaVision as an acquisition format all freaking day long. Holy crap. What a great idea. But as a projection format, this was kind of what surprised me, especially as a former projectionist, because I'm old enough to remember when Ron Howard's Far and Away came to the theater that I worked at, and we all had to be trained how to project 70 millimeter because none of us had done it. We'd all been dealing with 35 millimeter projectors. So, and think of how much worse it is, or not worse, but think of how much more is involved in bringing a VistaVision projector into a theater now, where most projectors are digital. So you don't even really have a projectionist per se. I'm sure that there's someone who's in charge of it, but you don't have someone who has to like bring in the film and assemble the print and quality control it and make sure it's framed right. You don't have to do that because you're just playing a DCP file. And now it's like, hey, everybody, you've got this, not just a film projector, but kind of an exotic film projector. And my big question was, why didn't they just optically print, like master this to 70 millimeter, where I was like, oh, I'm sure there's way more screens for 70. And as you pointed out, yes, but not that many in the whole, I believe it's in the whole country or in the whole world. Is it 30?
Yeah, there's about 30 in the U.S. So there's more in the world, but 30 in the U.S. And not
still
all
significantly more than 4.
Much more than 4, but not all of them are commercial theaters. Some states only have 1. Some states don't have any. It's like, so if you really want, if you're doing a wide 3,000 screen release, most people are not going to get to see it that way.
Yeah, I'd love to find out where they're showing One Battle After Another in VistaVision and maybe go check it out, because I have seen the movie and it looks amazing.
You might as well. When are you going to have another chance to see a movie in VistaVision? Maybe never. It's like...
Yeah, I mean, I think this is the first one that's been released in VistaVision in my life.
Well, I haven't seen it. I'm going to be in Los Angeles probably in about 2 weeks. If you want to go see it, I'll go see it. If it's still playing.
If it's still playing in VistaVision, you're on.
All right. Well, I think that's a good place for us to leave it. Why don't we get to the interview now with Pål Ulvik Rokseth.
Here we go.
The Cinematography Podcast Interview.
I'm joined now by Pål Ulvik Rokseth. He is the director of photography of the new Apple TV Plus feature, The Lost Bus. And you can see it now. It's now currently streaming. Welcome to the Cinematography Podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Pål, this is a harrowing movie. It is. It's got all kinds of, amazing visuals in it too. I want to just jump back a little bit. How did you get involved with this project? How did this come to be?
Well, I did a film in Norway with Pål, where he came to Norway to do a film where he told a quite dark story and needed. I think he wanted to respect that story. In its true origin, so bring in Norwegian crew. So that's my first contact with Pål, and then we did that movie together, and we've been staying in touch since. Really.
What was that? What was that movie?
That was 22nd of July. It was a film about this mass murderer in Norway, which.
Famous, yes, of course.
Dark movie to make.
and of course, we're talking about Paul Greengrass, who's the director of The Lost Bus, and 22 July. So you made a movie together, and when this one came about, he was like, "Hey, I got the next thing." Is that more or less it?
Well, it's funny. Like Gregory Goodman, the producer, he called me, and then he said, Pål was wondering, if you were interested in ever doing like a foreign project and moving out of Norway and doing like something in the US, and like obviously I said yes. I was more than willing to work with him because, Pål is a fantastic storyteller, a master at his craft, and a very smart man. So. Obviously, I wanted to. It was an honor just to be, asked, really, to be honest. So, but then obviously 5 minutes later, he called up and said, "Yeah, you got the gig. Let's go. We're gonna move out quickly." So Everything moves so fast. It's crazy. So I was a couple of weeks out. I was in Santa Fe. So starting prepping, because we prepped quite early on it, because there was a lot of VFX, as you know.
Yeah, there's a ton of VFX in this movie, and you're no stranger to VFX movies. I've seen The Wave, which of course was a harrowing disaster movie from 2015, and I remember thinking, oh yeah, my kids can watch this, but I remember my kids being traumatized against tsunamis for the longest time after seeing that movie. So I mean, would you say that you feel like you found your niche? Is disaster movies a little bit of your thing, or is it just something that that the luck of the dice? How did you and disaster movies kind of like become a thing?
Well, actually, that film was the wave was actually I was just a part of that one, a small part.
Okay.
I worked with the same director on the next movie he did, which was the North Sea, which was another disaster movie actually. So, but no,
So no
I
stranger to
don't-
disaster movies. Okay, all right.
No, it's been a couple of them. Not really. I haven't. It's not nothing that I've deliberately pursued in any way. But Norway's a small film industry. So I grew up there. I developed everything I know in that little part of the world. So it was natural for me to work with obviously the directors then. And then at the time when I started out, also these movies was almost a small. They kept popping up because it was a Scandinavian way to make like a thriller action kind of thing with a little bit heavy VFX in the end of the movie, because we didn't have the big budget, but for like one sequence we could put a lot of money into it. So it's kind of interesting because it's shot in a small way. You shoot in a small way, and then you tell the drama, and you try to do your best with locations and natural light and all that stuff, and you try to pivot all the money and all the budget into the greater, bigger sequence. So, it's been a couple of them, but it's, to answer the question, no, not really. I haven't deliberately asked for any disaster movie.
Okay, well, let's move back to The Lost Bus, because The Lost Bus does have, a lot of firelight in particular. Like, firelight is there's tons and tons of clouds of smoke, and the sky is darkened out, the sun is darkened out, and there's a ton of firelight that is what's illuminating the motivating light source that illuminates the actors on the bus and in various other scenes. In order to pull this off, particularly all of this firelight and these darkened skies, I have to wonder if it was shooting at night to create some of this effect. Is it working on a volume? How do you go about bringing firelight? Like, the fire is basically a character in this. It's like the fire is so omnipresent and so surrounding, and at first it's sort of like teased. It's like it's off in the distance, but then when you get really into the thick of it, tell me about lighting fire and using fire as your source.
Well, yeah, you're quite right. It came quite early in prep. I think that Paul wanted this fire to be, a character. It has its own kind of cinematic tool as a character that evolves through the story and then gets closer to our characters. But also, that was also when I read the script the first time. I was terrified about how is this technically going to be done in a bus with 22 kids, shooting hours out. How do you do that? And practically where do we do this? Safety, obviously, and also on top of that, Paul's very true style of trying to tell it in a real way, trying to approach it as a real story, not shot by shot. He shoots the full sequence in one, So so there's like 10-15 minutes takes where I have to go through multiple locations, in, out, interior, exterior, into a bus, out of the bus. So knowing all this in advance, got me quite thinking about obviously how do you do it. So, and then specifically as you mentioned, was that special character of light when there is so much smoke that day becomes night, basically, because the sun doesn't penetrate the smoke, and it becomes this, and the fire obviously around the smoke just creates this amber, Blade Runner kind of vibe, And you were quite right also. We didn't shoot that much night, but we ended up, I for some reason in some meeting in prep tried to or they asked me how we're going to do all this, and then I was like, yeah, you could obviously shoot everything in dusk, because then you have like that beautiful amber light, but as a joke almost. But then suddenly that's what we ended up doing.
Oh, really?
Most of the sequences where we were inside the smoke column, we shot in dusk. So we prepped the Cliff Landing, our first AD. We set up everything. We used 6-7 hours just to practice and figuring out the whole theater play, so to say, like, and then we went in and shot it for 45 to an hour minutes.
Wow. I'm pretty blown away by this, because to shoot in that limited window of a day, you only get that time, and then it's over. Did you guys plan out, like, so you had another full day which led up to then this sequence, so you did all these other things and you basically got ready then for the dusk fire smoke sequence? Or how does that work into your schedule? I can't imagine you guys are waiting around all day just to shoot that one portion.
No, there was obviously we had to shoot other parts of the movie too. So, but we were also, but the way Paul shoots, the way he wants to try to recreate that documentary feeling of seeing the scene evolve in front of your eyes in real time, and you have to take decisions. You have to move the camera instinctively inside the story. It's kind of it makes kind of sense, because you don't, if you just shoot it 3 or 4 times with multiple like cameras. We had like 2 cameras, sometimes 3. I operate one of the cameras, so like it's almost just doing a master take every time, and then there's so much you get out of it. So it's kind of a perfect combo of having that limited time pressure, because it also creates this tension for the actors, for the crew. Everybody needs to kind of step up, and it feels more real, even for all the extras, the cars. It just creates a more reality to, which fits well with the way he tells the story. But again, it wasn't. There was also sequences that went into night. There was like one of the biggest fire roads. We're obviously going into night. On top of this, again, like in the dusk environment, I had so much tungsten light, it was crazy. Like we had, like, because of budget, I had to find some other fixtures than LED, because there was just not enough output, and there would be so much of DMX control. So we ended up just using maxi broods and sky pans.
Wow.
The old the big sky pans, which was, they had to dust the dust of them on the shelf, and we got them really cheap. It's just like
they've been collecting dust inside of a stage somewhere for years. But yes, those are giant, like 5K, huge indirect lights. They bounce off a big white surface. For our listeners or viewers right now are not familiar with the sky pans, but when you need a lot of tungsten light into a space, that's your ticket. So you were breaking those out, rigging them up on condors, or what was the?
Yeah, it was almost like a football stadium vibe, because like the bus, especially these sequences, was the bus traveling through the backlot, and we had an enormously amount of VFX, now SFX fire. So we had gas pipe, like it took days and weeks to prep each sequence, because there was so much piping going on for all the propane.
Sure.
So obviously that was a safe element. We couldn't have a full blazing fire on the whole road. So I just augmented, like the tungsten on what do you call them, scissor lifts and
scissor
condors around the set, almost like a stadium light. And then that was obviously filled with smoke on the set, like thick smoke, so I could backlight and have a small, almost like an amber, ambience push behind the smoke. So that created that indirect kind of bounced light into the smoke that gave that amber feeling,
Yeah. There's so much smoke in this movie as well, too. I assumed that you must have been trying to fake some of it inside of a stage somewhere and stuff, just to keep that smoke in the air, because I know that's the thing about, you have to use so much smoke when you're outside, because it dissipates and floats off just into the ether. Was any of these sequences inside in a stage, so able to keep sort of like the haze visible, or did you really just keep pumping it outside?
No, we actually didn't do what we did. We had some gimbal work on the stage, which eventually, we prepped the whole movie thinking the whole bus sequence is going to be on a volume, but we also didn't want to go out of our backlot, so we wanted to build a volume in one of the biggest stages at the studio. So, but halfway during the production or something, I think we just ended up abandoning that idea and then going for like like a gimbal in a blue environment with I had some other lighting instead of the volume, which was, a big kind of turnaround for me, because, I prepped the whole movie based on that. But, that again goes back to Paul, how he wanted to shoot it, because, he wanted to shoot it outside, not on the stage, because, the G-forces, the movements in the bus, the sun, just the surroundings for the actors become so much more real, and also for us to shoot it. So it's just more his style of doing it. So I think he hates being on the stage, to be honest.
I understand. Well, yeah, I mean, especially like, this is a real event. This isn't, for anyone who's not familiar with the campfire of 2018, but, Paradise, California, burnt to the ground. It was a horrible, devastating, fire. A lot of people lost their lives. There's a lot of property damage. It's a major event in California and made national news. In fact, there was even a documentary called Rebuilding Paradise that Ron Howard made in 2020. I talked to him about that on this show. So, did you guys watch that documentary? Was that like at all part of your research in preparing for this?
Yes, we saw kind of everything that was out there. I think there was this feature film, Something the Brave, also, which was I saw. But Paul is quite good at collecting real material from firefighters, and then I was revisiting some of the images just before this today, and then I found some of the, like, one of the firefighters sent me all his iPhone videos, and that was most of the research, because it's so insane, because they're sitting inside these fire trucks, and they're filming with their iPhones, and then it looks so surreal. It's like a nightmare. It looks like some of the stuff we try to portray, but it's just almost worse, because it's so sci-fi world-like, But then I think that's also why Paul wanted to go that point of view, like handheld, or not handheld, but like the point of view kind of storytelling of these characters, because it felt most true to what he saw was the actual reality of how it was to be inside this fire, And again, he's very respectful of trying to tell a real story in a real way, I think.
Yeah, I'm wondering, I'm curious, did the real Kevin McKay and the real America Ferrera's character, I'm blanking on it right now, Mary Ludwig, did they end up coming to set, or did they end up having any kind of connection? Did you meet them?
We met them.
Oh, wow.
We met them. Yeah. They were fantastic. Like they told their story, and then it was it's weird. We're doing all this technical stuff on set with fire and smoke and everything, and then it's almost like surreal when they come and they're like, yeah, that's the guy that sat in the bus and did that stuff. Did
they try to give you some feedback? Did they try to go like, oh, it wasn't like that? No, it was more smoke, or it was more fire, or no, was it?
No, I feel like they were sweet. They were very sweet. Kevin was very. I think he said, like, yeah, we didn't talk that much about how it was looking, because it wasn't all there. There was obviously a lot of VFX and
of course,
running around on the backlot, but I think he felt confident that Paul was going to tell a story that was not far from what he felt was the truth of it all.
Yeah, and it's true. There's a ton of VFX inside of this project. And how is that working for you then with the VFX team, the VFX artists, because you have to use your imagination that, like, oh, this is going to get replaced. There's a garbage mat over here. There's blue screen over here. There's extra, flame and fire that's going to be coming up. It requires you to have this extra abstraction in your brain in order to visualize and then communicate that to other people of like, oh, well, there's going to be a fire that's coming up over here, and that's what this light gag is and whatnot. How much does that slow down your process? Is it a pretty big impediment to working, or does it have you integrated it into such a way where it's just like, we know that VFX is gonna take care of this? Tell me about your process of integrating, especially like the fire effects with the VFX team and getting the shots.
Obviously, first of all, like Charlie Noble is our VFX supervisor. Is a very mellow, sweet guy, and then his team and everybody. We were having a quite great, prep relationship where we had offices next to each other. We were talking about all this stuff all the time. We had previews. They did so much great previews and scenarios and environments in Unreal Engine where we can go in and watch it.
Yeah.
See it. See how it looked. How's the route? He also did like this great detailed map of the bus route with timings, which is this big, you can zoom endless into the map, it's digital, but you saw the route, and then on each route you had like reference pictures in real video. So there was like almost like a journey. It's like an interactive map, basically, you can go in. So having that in prep obviously helped us vastly in trying to tell all the crew and where to frame, where to be. But also, I think my biggest fight in prep was to align myself with the SFX units, like making sure that we had fire where there was at least some fire where we were supposed to be fire. At some point, I wanted to light the whole thing only with fire, but that was just impossible because of safety and regulations and, just physicality of the gas tanks freezing up because they couldn't do it so long. So. But I think, like fighting for having as much, and then that's the great thing about Charlie also, he also wanted to have elements for real. So not only, did we have fire, we also built buildings, parts of buildings that was set to fire, the school, for example. And also our greens department made this beautiful forest that we can have our set in, which we did outside instead of inside. So there's always this collaboration of trying to do as much as possible or some elements, and then having the knowledge and communication of how to kind of evolve that further into post. And obviously there's a lot of VFX going into the heavy part of the ending.
For sure.
Where but we did drive the bus down like this crooked road, which was crazy. And then that was also set to fire. And we had like so many brutes into the forest. It was crazy. So
you guys also have
it's a good
fire trucks going down these like, fire roads and these different sorts of things too. It's like, look, I would say, and exactly like that, how this conversation has gone, we dove immediately into, the meat of it, the fire and the fire sequences and the climax of this movie. But there's a lot of buildup. There's a lot of buildup all through, before we get to the fire. And you've got a lot of aerial shots, and you've got all of this sort of like pastoral. Now, was any of this shot in the town of Paradise? Was this New Mexico standing in? How did you guys create the sort of the world before you get into the fire?
Well, it's it's a web of lies.
Yes, but you lie and you cheat to make a movie. That's how you do it. But it's really convincing. It's incredibly convincing. So that this is what we get to talk about on the show is a little bit of like how the sausage gets made, how it all goes together.
No, that's true. No, it's the thing is, Paradise kind of burnt down, so we had to recreate it from how it did look before it burnt down. So, and we were also in New Mexico in this backlot, and that doesn't really have that much trees, and Paradise is very tree heavy.
Very much.
Basically, there's a lot of material that burns there, so to say. So we did not go to. I'm not sure. Charlie might have done some plates there for some of the aerials, but or some references. But we shot most of it, in at the backlot, and also up in Ruidoso, which is this small town up in a bit north, I think, of Santa Fe, up in the height where the trees. There's trees all over the place. We got a lot of those streets, a lot of the pines and all that stuff in camera up there with the bus driving around, picking up kids. But it's basically just location work in and around Santa Fe.
Yeah.
With enhanced, we added a lot of trees in VFX. Like that was probably the most except for the fire, like to the build up, you had to. There is, it's flat in Santa Fe. It's just, desert. So Charlie put in layers of trees.
Well, Charlie and his team did such a fantastic job with the VFX too, because I've lived in Los Angeles for 25 years, and I have seen clearly people joke about how there's not seasons in Los Angeles. That's not true. There's summer, and fire, of course. Fire is the fourth season in Los Angeles. And very, very well in living in LA what a fire looks like. You can see it, rising up in the distance if it's far away, or if you're, more close to it, exactly what those plume of smokes look like. And your team did such an amazing job. It looks incredibly authentic and realistic to, forest fires, structure fires, the amount of smoke that is filling the frame, filling the air. It's dramatic. And I know that I'm assuming that's all VFX. That you guys weren't actually, figuring out practical ways to do that. But the seamless integration of that VFX to the work that you're doing, both in the city and on the bus. And I'm reminded very specifically of the heartbreaking, harrowing moment when they finally arrive at what they think is the drop-off point to get the kids off the bus, only to find that drop-off point and totally engulfed in flames. That's a major building. I'm sure some of that was probably enhanced with VFX, but you mentioned you got to burn that. So it's like, can you talk a little bit about that moment in particular, of like all the flames jumping out and you've got a bus in the frame with filled with kids? It's like, how do all these elements come together?
No, you're right. That was actually outside our office building at the studio. BK built this, corner of the corner of the school basically when they stop, and that was built in a metal frame, I think, because the surreal thing is that we could drive our bus up. Stop, and he can just add flame, so it's like it just started with a little bit of an idle flame, and then it just exploded, and the heat, and I think Matthew's doing something like with his hands there. I was in front of him. I was like, I have long hair, so I was feeling the heat, it was extreme. So the physicality of it was there, and then I think as you say, like what Charlie did, just enhancing and continuing the wall into the next thing, seeing the parking space. There was tons of blues around that he had to fill in. But it's
impressive. It's filmmaking on the highest level. It's really, really great stuff. And I've worked on movies around flame bars and gas explosions and stuff like that. You feel the heat. That's the actors. It really helps their acting because they feel the wave of heat that comes from that, and the entire crew, everyone who's there. It's like that's an experience. There's a bit of reality there because you don't get too close, and you don't want to get too close because just the amount of thermal units that are coming at you feel. It's like, I'm sure there's a lot of safety, and you've got people with extinguishers and everything else because you never know. But anyone get burned on this? Everyone okay?
No,
you guys made it through?
No, everything was. Yeah, we made it through the whole thing. I think, there was also obviously because. There's also a lot of winds in New Mexico, so there was some days we couldn't have fire at all because there was too much wind. So the ambers,
the embers, exactly.
They were
floating.
It was we didn't want to burn down the place, so we were really. There was always the fire department was with us all the time. Really much help, from them. They were on the premises all the time, but there was definitely times where we couldn't do at least as much as we wanted because obviously the danger was too high. It was also quite dry, Another thing which was interesting with physicality of it was the smoke because we used this extreme big smoke machines to push in smoke exterior, and it was this oil-based smoke, and it was so thick that all the the bus windows was filled with oil after one take, so we have to take it off. The lenses, with the clear glass in front of the lens, obviously was also quite heavily affected. So we had to at some point switch up from oil to water-based smoke, which created all sorts of problems because, as you know, it vaporizes when it comes to heat. So when you have both, it just disappeared. But but we managed to
Yeah.
do a trade-off in the end, you know.
Yeah, you pull it off quite effectively, and I'm sure that the technical challenges of trying to mix your smoke and your heat and your practicals and your all of the different sort of lighting effects that are going into this is not insignificant. I want to talk a little bit. We haven't talked, Paul Greengrass movies. There is an aesthetic that comes from, pseudo documentary, handheld styled, frenetic movement. Tell me a little bit about the framing and the handheld effects of this movie. Is that inside of your sort of like natural wheelhouse? Do you like to shoot things this way? It definitely creates a heightened, sense of danger. Plus, I would say it throws back a little bit to making you feel like you're almost watching a documentary, since a lot of documentaries are shot in similar styles. How important was the framing and the motion and all of this stuff? Can you talk about that a bit?
Mm-hmm. Well, Paul's style, like he comes from documentary and reportage footage from news. He's been in war situations where he's been documenting. So I think he has a very close relationship with that Super 16 small camera on the shoulder with a zoom that can be very direct and tell the story in a very true way. I guess one of the first films he wanted me to see when we first met was Penbreakers. I think it's the Don't Look Back, the Bob Dylan documentary, where that film is also just a masterpiece in how to just be fly on the wall with a documentary camera, just moving around. It's very true, and it's very much power in that little package you have as a documentary filmmaker with a small camera. But again, he, as I mentioned earlier, he likes to shoot all the scenes quite in as oneers, as like a full scene. So the actors can evolve, they can do whatever, they can move wherever you want. They want. There's not like a pickup of a shot. It's not like a close-up. You kind of have to find it as you go. So the biggest problem, or not a problem, the biggest challenge and the best reward, it's like it's like two sides of it, is that I tend to like to, be on a dolly and frame up and light it, and, we can do all it's very comfortable, but it's also difficult to make exactly what you want to do. And sometimes your ideas is not what you really want to end up with. So this way of doing it, you have to kind of just follow the characters in their environment, and then suddenly you find yourself being in this close-up, and it looks beautiful because there's a silhouette, and you never thought about it because like, oh shit, this is where I had to be with the camera at a certain time in that moment. So I think it's very deliberating, or it's very it's very liberating to operate and put the lights where it's supposed to be in reality, and then trying to tell the story with the camera dynamically, and then that gives me so much more. At least with Paul, I feel like some of the images I would never think out of doing. Just this is the framing, this is how I would frame it, because sometimes it's just you're really standing on the edge of some upside down, kind of trying to hold the camera steady, and that creates that tension, that frame, and then I think that would never occur to me if I was sitting prepping and doing a shot list, So, but then again, obviously you have to swallow a lot of other stuff, which is, sometimes you have to shoot with full front lit, and then it doesn't match. And then it's like, you just have to, throw yourself under the bus a little bit.
Literally in more than one way. Was this a single camera show? Was it pretty much always framed for one camera, or did you break out other cameras as well?
No, we had always two cameras, sometimes three cameras on the heavier days. For dusk, we had like a third camera body just to try to pick, because it was so little time. But he usually only watches a camera, or me, and then we do the B camera, just try to steal as much as they can, and then we also had a lot of rigging cameras, GoPros, and I rigged Komodos, or these small cameras on side of cars and stuff like that.
Definitely, I was gonna bring that up. There's quite a bit of shots through like reflections too, reflections on like the front windshield of the bus and the people inside the bus, and seeing them in the reflections, what's going on in the world. Any of that practical? Is not all VFX? It's got a very real feel to it, but I have to ask, because it's like it's so much more challenging when you have to do it, for real.
No, yeah, well, obviously a lot of the stuff was we never shot any cars without glass, so Charlie just enhanced some of the reflections. But also, it was a bit weird to me, because Paul wanted the camera to be outside the bus, looking in through the windows, and then I was like, but is that? You could never be there when you're doing a documentary. You can't just. It's like Superman. You can't just fly outside the car. So I was a bit conflicted in like, is that going to work? So we did build like a platform outside this bus, which actually Matthew was driving all the time. He was.
Oh wow.
He was sitting in the bus he came to set in the morning, sat in the bus. He was there all day. He drove it. He reset the bus. He did everything. He never left the bus.
Wow. Okay.
he was he was fantastic. And then so he just became our driver. So we were sitting there a lot talking in the front there, But no, he was driving with us in front of us. So we were outside hanging, trying to hold on.
That brings up a really good point, because, quite often actors are not allowed to drive the vehicles in which that they are tasked with driving. And there's some very good reasons for that, safety reasons. Matthew had to learn commercial bus driving for this role. Then he had to learn how to operate and drive this giant thing, because he was literally doing the driving.
Definitely. He didn't do all the stunt driving, which was more because he wasn't allowed. I don't think he was allowed to drive outside. No, he did drive on some of the roads we blocked off, but in Rud also. But, we also had Jeff Dashnell doing action stunt second unit thing, which we had stunt drivers and everything. But because we were inside this, what do you call it? Backlot. I think we were allowed to do more than usually driving in LA Center.
All right, I want to go back a little bit, just to, you were saying the actors are allowed to move where they want. It's more of this documentary style. You're lighting, environments rather than just people. How does that change the way that you work? I mean, if you're lighting spaces rather than faces, you mentioned sometimes you have the compromise of everything being front lit, but how do you that sounds like the challenge. How do you keep everything looking the best it can possibly be when you don't have the ability to always get in and tweak and noodle and add your cutters and your highlights and all the extra bits? Or how do you sneak that in?
Well, that was part, going back to the start of the conversation, that was my biggest anxiety, how do you do that inside a bus with limited space? And normally you can put in a poly or a bounce to get some handheld behind the camera, but on this one I had to, or first of all, I think if you do go for that realistic kind of approach, then you come better out of it if you don't do that much. If you try to put the camera in the right position, so at least you can, it's a pragmatic approach to it all, and you kind of have to let that what do you call it, precision beast that you usually are, you have to put that aside and then just tell the story with the camera, because that's how you move the camera and where you go and then what you land on and when you move, and those decisions are way more important than the rest when you do it that way. But obviously, and there's some shots in the movie which I was like, whoa, that's dark. But it's a consequence of that. The
style,
what do you call it? Yeah, the style, not like the uncompromised style. That's when it's true. But obviously, I had to hide tons of small, I don't know what you call them, small LED.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff. I had like a stereotubes. We also did paint out quite some of the. I had the stereotubes all around inside the
bus.
The bus, and then Jake, our dimmer operator, and Todd Heater, they were like just on the dimmer board trying to go up, and I was like, come on, da. So sometimes if there's specific, directions that I have to move that we have prepped in that setup at the start of the day, then we have the possibility to plan a little bit, add a little bit, fill there. When I pan around, you can take down some lights so you don't get shot. Like it's a game. But embracing the non-precision, I think, is the trick of the game. If you want to do it that way, then.
And you do get, I'm not going to say a get out of jail free card, but there's still the grade. The grade gives you then the ability to adjust your lighting levels to a certain extent, adjust how the whole thing looks and feels. Did you find yourself having to do extra work in the grade as a consequence of shooting in this more documentary style, or was it no different than any other project?
No, all this different kind of, it's more, I think it's the same for a colorist, for me, lighting it in the sense that you have to embrace the environment, not the detail. So, like, if there is a silhouette shot of a character, you just have to deal with it. And then, when we do, and then obviously Billy, our editor, is a master at, editing. So he know how to get out of jail in the edit. So he also sees, opportunities to, he's helping a lot. So, but, it's a broad strokes, but I think, the film had this very, three kind of different looks, and you had like the normal paradise of daylight look, and then it has like this, which was important to Paul to be warm, and then because the heat and the warmth and all that fire burning, and then going into this warm amber kind of night, crazy weird sci-fi world. So it wasn't more difficult, but still it's always, I feel that's probably the most difficult part of my journey in a film. I think the end, like the coloring, I think it's difficult. But again, a lot of the stuff comes out of this. I do create, like, because I love shooting on film, but on this one, obviously that's impossible, I think, in the time, because we have so long takes. So I usually just do like one LUT for the whole show, and then that's like a film stock, and then we create it with color and lights and everything. So. And on top of that, again, we're shooting on Super 16 lenses. So we're just using a small, just like, I think it's a 178% zoom into the digital sensor. Because the Super is crazy.
I realize
so it's very small.
We didn't talk about the camera. You're shooting a Super 16 format for this movie?
Yeah.
Oh,
it's all on a Canon Canon zooms. So the 864. So I guess...
All right. Well, let's take a step back then. I didn't realize I was watching a Super 16 sized image. What cameras and lenses and format did you guys do for this?
Again, like Paul likes that style. I think he grew up probably on that format. So, going back to Bloody Sunday, that's also Super 16, a beautifully shot film also, and directed. But we shot on digital, like these Alexa 35s, but in
a Super 16 extraction from the sensor.
Yes, we did. Yeah. I don't think you can have like you have a Super 16 mode in the camera, but I think it's capped at not shooting raw. So we ended up shooting this raw format and then zoomed into the image just to get the raw footage for Charlie. But it's quite interesting because the Canon zooms, they're just so versatile. They're like, the range is insane. It's
absolutely. So use the 8-64. Did you use the longer ones as well?
No, I don't think. No, we started out the show because I was trying to, again, the anxiety of it all. I wanted to shoot as big format as possible. So we started up with the Panavision was super helpful, and Dan Sasaki, he picked up this VA zooms, which is a small, like I think they were quite prototype vibe at the time, or at least they were silver, not coated.
Sure.
So we had the Canon zooms on the side, but I had the VA zooms and primes, and we started the whole show using those zooms. But Paul, after 1 week, he was like, I miss the range, I need the range, I need the punch, I need that, like the energy that you get from the Canon zooms, or at least having that range on your shoulder. So we just swapped it out completely and then shot the rest.
Wow. All right.
On the zoom.
Well, that's really interesting because, Super 16 is a small format. compared to 35, which is the standard for motion picture. What is the effective resolution that you guys ended up then working with inside of that? Do you know?
Well, I think you shoot into. I'm not so technical in that aspect, but I think it's a 2K image kind of we're working with, but we blew it up to 35 in the end, so you got the 4K resolution.
Absolutely. Up converted.
The end is
I get it. Oh, that's awesome. Well, what a unique and cool trick for this movie. Like I wish that I brought it up earlier. I would have redirected a little bit of my thinking. But this is this is really fascinating to me because not a lot of people are doing what you guys did for this. Usually the thought process is we want to get a large negative. We want to get the finest noise and grain possible. But as soon as you start making those extractions, that changes. The texture, the noise becomes an element to it. And shame on me. I'm usually pretty savvy at this and picking it out. But I felt like you guys were just working at a deeper stop. I thought that you guys were just getting more depth of field because of the way that you were choosing to light, and not because you were extracting down to something smaller. So
that's interesting.
Yeah. Did you? I guess my question is: have you ever done this before? Have you ever done an extraction of a sensor like that for a project, for a feature like this?
No, I used this as a good test, I would say, to test. It was like, it's a bit crazy because you see the neg, it's like this big black square, and then there's a circle, and then there's a little bit of an image there. But I must say though, I'm so impressed by these the new cameras, and then especially the color reproduction of that, the Lexa 35, it's insane. And then another reason for going that route is to maintain, because we did shoot so much fire, we maintained the red color for one, and also the depth into the flames, so we could dig out in post. Because I felt one of the consistency problems I foresaw was that if we shot this on a format which just burn out the flame, and then it was just white. Obviously, it's a gas flame most of the time, so it doesn't have that much carbon in it, so it's not that red. So it's more like a yellow-blue flame sometimes. So burning that out and just being white-yellow, that would be problematic if the VFX fire has more depth, because they usually do that more. So trying to keep the fire consistent, help. So that camera just really helped. And also I think the definition that the Super 16 lenses have, because of the lack of resolution, and that they collide with the super modern sensor, and it's an interesting texture of it. It becomes almost, it really looks like
you're working with low resolution and some of the highest performing, and most people don't know this, but Super 16 lenses, this is, I'm sure you know this, but this is for our listeners and viewers. Super 16 lenses generally are some of the sharpest lenses ever created. They have to be because of that format. And so there's a really, really cool effect going on here with this movie that is combining the relatively low res, because of course you're getting even less resolution because it's a widescreen format. It's not a 4:3. You're not getting the maximum height that you can. You're shaving off some. What is the aspect ratio? Is it a 2:3:9? Is it a 2:1? Is it a 16:9?
I think we ended up on 2:3:9. No,
yeah,
I think that was the theatrical release. It's a petite format, man. Like it's almost like when you shoot.
I got to imagine
Super 16. It's like almost 8 mil.
I'm sure that the director's monitor or the client monitor type of stuff, everyone who's looking at that is looking at this interesting extraction in the middle of all that. They got to get really close to see the detail. That's super cool.
Oh, it's cool.
Hey, Paul, this has been such a great conversation. I'm really, really glad that you were able to fit it into your schedule. I know you're out working right now. I know you probably can't tell anyone what it is that you're working on, but you're somewhere in Europe and it's a Sunday. So thank you for making this call happen.
No, thank you so much.
Well, hey,
I am with Paul though. That I can say.
All right, you're out with Paul. You guys are out doing another thing. Well, I can't wait to see what it is. I can't wait to have you come back on the show. Thanks so much for being on the Cinematography Podcast.
Thank you for having me.
So that was Pål Ulvik Rokseth. Hey, thank you so much for being on the show. Lost Bus is fantastic, and I can't wait to see what you do next.
Awesome. Yeah, I still haven't seen it. I need to check it out.
And now, short ends.
All right, so Ben, it's our short end time of the show. It's when we talk about our pet obsessions. What are you about this week?
Well, I found a new app that's, I think it's mostly for tablets, but it's really cool. And it's for people. I think people will find it handy if they're doing visual effects. And I think that they'll find it handy if they're doing anything like in Blender or whatever. It's good for creature making. It's called Nomad Sculpt. And it's like $20. And it's like, holy shit, an app that I only pay for once. What the hell is that about? And it's, if you're familiar with ZBrush, to me, I don't know that it seems like a poor man's ZBrush. It just seems like another approach to what ZBrush does. I'm sure a real ZBrush artist would tell me to stick it up my ass, because ZBrush is a super powerful 3D app. A lot of people who like create CGI creatures and whatnot use ZBrush to accomplish that. I downloaded it because as I've talked about on here, I've recently kind of gotten into 3D printing, and I was looking for ways that you could create something that you could also 3D print. But the interesting thing is you can bring, so like, let's say you have Polycam, which is kind of a cheap scanner app for your iPhone. You can scan a room, you can scan an object, whatever. You can actually bring that, textures and all, into Nomad Sculpt and work with it. And I'm no good with it yet at all. I've just kind of started dicking around with it, but I can see it as being something that if you're making like an indie film and you needed to create, CGI assets that you were going to use, Nomad Sculpt is a super accessible, super inexpensive way to do it. I'm using it on a regular old iPad, not even an iPad Pro. I've got the stylus. And just 15 seconds into dicking around with it, I was like, oh yeah, I can make a face. I can do this. And it requires knowing how to sculpt. That's its own problem, but it's easy enough to practice on this. And I've watched a bunch of tutorials, and I saw people make like very realistic looking hands and right down to the fingerprints, like with textures and subsurface scattering. And again, that's something you could bring into any 3D, program of your choice, be it, Blender, Houdini, whatever. You can also export stuff like that and bring it into After Effects, drop that stuff in there. So even if you were like creating a fake can of soda or something and you needed to make a logo, you could slap it onto a 3D model in here pretty easily, export it as an OBJ file, or there's a bunch of different ones. And also you could 3D print it, but I know this isn't the 3D printing podcast, so I'm not gonna talk about my hobby here, but I think it's really interesting to go like, okay, I can scan an object, bring it into this, make some changes to it, edit it, cut out the stuff I don't want, and print it or import it into any number of 3D programs. And somebody listening to me was just like, damn it, I've been meaning to get ZBrush, but it's too expensive. Let me try it. So to that person, give it a shot.
That sounds awesome. Very, very cool.
How about yourself, Ilya? What is your obsession this week?
It's interesting. I am aware of the Blacklist, and I'm sure that you're aware of the Blacklist too. It's perhaps the most famous, list of unproduced scripts in Hollywood. I had no idea until very recently how much more stuff the Blacklist has done besides just publish this list. They're now involved in a whole number of things. And I'm not going to go into all of them, but if you want to go check out the Blacklist, it's we'll put a link in the show notes for this episode. But yeah, there's missing some vowels for the Blacklist URL. But they have a new thing, which it kind of resonates with me because, I'm originally from Northern California, from the Bay Area. And there's a lot of people who are from the Bay Area famously. And I know I talked about recently Freaky Tales on this show, which is all set in the East Bay. Well, the Blacklist has started something called the Bay List. And they got together with a guy named Raphael Cassell, who he is a writer, producer, actor, rapper, perhaps best known for Blind Spotting. He and The Blacklist have basically put together a script competition of some sort, selecting the 10 best unproduced scripts from the Bay Area. And I thought this was kind of interesting because I was like, how do you define if something is from the Bay Area? And it actually has a whole very description about this. And I've become, I think, a little bit more conscientious now about, homegrown film communities, because there is definitely, it's small, but there's a homegrown film community in Oregon, which now, having lived in Oregon for the last 3 years, I'm getting now more exposed to and getting to understand. And there's a lot of pride of like the Oregon filmmakers. And just as there was a ton of pride from Bay Area filmmakers back when I was originally from back there. So I wanted to know what the requirements were to be part of the Bay List. And there's a whole listing for deadlines and the special requirements. But the special requirements, here I'm going to read them for you, so because this includes millions and millions of people. You must define your close ties to the Bay Area. When you submit the script in the form of when you submit the script, you have to put a brief personal statement. And the Bay Area is defined as these counties: Alameda, Contra Costa, Marin, Napa, San Mateo, Santa Clara, Solano, Sonoma, and San Francisco. And those close ties are as follows. You have to be born in the Bay Area. You had to grow up in the Bay Area. You had to currently live in the Bay Area. You had to currently live in the Bay Area, or you had to have lived in the Bay Area for a significant period of time, or the writer is a part-time resident currently of the Bay Area. Screenplays and pilots do not need to be based in the Bay Area to qualify, which I thought was pretty interesting, because there's an awful lot of people who would be like, I got something set in the Bay and I'm from, Madagascar or wherever it might be. I'm going to submit to this. But no, this was about trying to like bring up people who are ostensibly from the Bay Area or have lived a big portion of their life there, which I thought was kind of interesting. And I
hope Fraser Bradshaw is all over this already.
I hope so too. I mean, there's so many people, Tom Hanks is from the Bay Area. There's a lot of people from the Bay Area. There's a lot of people who are from this zone. I'm really curious to see who gets selected, how it comes together, and then also what the future of this is, or if it will spawn other areas too, because it's not just, Oregon and the Bay Area. I know people in all over the country, all over the world, who have really deep ties to their communities. I know there's a very, very dedicated group of like Ohioan filmmakers. I mean, the people are like seriously into that. If this does well,
I know one of them very well, actually.
I was going to say, I think that a regional film industry is not a bad thing. A regional film industry where, it is essentially created by and to a certain extent for the people in an area is really exciting. And I think that we should actually try to encourage as much regionality as possible, because, everywhere is different. And this whole country is made up of all of these different places and these different things. It's a little bit weird that 99% of our movies are kind of LA or New York. That seems like,
or Atlanta or now England. Yeah, I mean, like I remember in the 90s when Victor Nunez kind of blew up with Ruby in Paradise and Yuli's Gold. He was the big Florida filmmaker, and I was in Orlando, and there are scenes from, I think, Ruby in Paradise, I think from both actually, that were filmed in Orlando. And there's an enormous amount of civic pride that you have, and I'm not someone who's racked with civic pride even over my very beloved home. My adopted home of Los Angeles, where I've been for so long. But it was like, oh, cool. It's like, it would immediately get it was a dopamine hit of like seeing like, oh yeah, that's 436. That's the street I drove down to get here, in a movie. And, there's also obviously, regional quirks, there's regional biases, there's interesting things that somebody coming into a place would not know about if they weren't from there, and even as like LA based people, we're used to going into other cities and, using them for their resources, but we don't know them that well. And it's not in an abusive way, but it's just, you're making a movie in Atlanta, you get hired, you go to Atlanta, you make the movie in Atlanta, you don't like settle into the culture, and I've worked in Atlanta before, and I worked in Mobile, Alabama so many times. I actually started to have my own haunts and places that I would go to on my day off, because I knew Mobile pretty well at that point. But, but that's kind of what you want. And yeah, Orlando had and has its own indigenous filmmaking community. I remember I had a film at the Phoenix Film Festival years ago, and they had one of the programs was local shorts, and I'm like, oh, I the Los Angeles, the real filmmaker, I will bless them by going to see their shorts. And I went and saw them, and I'm like, yeah, they don't need my charity. They're great. They were doing great work, really. And you would see the same actors popping up, like they would have their own stars who were like the big people who were in lots of stuff. You would see similar cinematographers. You'd see just trends in the way that they did stuff. But I think that it's interesting. I think most markets of a certain size will have that, and probably even beneath that, there's some dude, making weird ass movies or little, cool, interesting art films or animations or whatever, just about anywhere you go. That's the beauty, honestly, of where technology is now. Cause when we were starting out, you would have to we had one film lab in Florida, Continental Film and Video, and they weren't that great. And that's all we had to work with. You could go to Color Lab. Was that in Atlanta? You could go to, there were other labs you could go to. And now, there's, 3 film labs in the world or whatever. It's hardly any film labs left, but anyone, anywhere can get a hold of, any one of the bajillion products you sell and a good laptop, and they can make a film. They can do it on their phone even if they want to.
Yeah, I think, though, that there's something about the regionality, too, that's really interesting, though, because I don't feel like when Hollywood, and I'm using Hollywood as a generic term here, it could be anything with a budget from anywhere. Unless the people who are writing it, the people who are doing it are really ingrained in that community, they miss a lot of the stuff. They miss a lot of the stuff that only the locals get, that only the people who are, dyed in the wool, the people who are from that area are going to pick up on, which is too bad. Yeah, it's interesting. I'm not saying that Hollywood are film tourists who show up and they, think they know a thing, but it's like there is something authentic about regional productions made with a regional cast, with a regional writer, a regional director, people who
outside of the cinema industrial complex.
Exactly.
I think that's really what you're saying. It's
I think that's wonderful. I've seen incredible movies from at film festivals made in different parts of the world where that's the great thing about foreign films, is that sometimes you really get the experience of that other culture, those other lives. And anything that is going to encourage that, like the Bay List, anything that's going to encourage, more sort of regional production, I'm all in favor of. All right, Ben, that's just about going to do it for this episode. Where can people find you if they want to track you down?
Find me at benrock.com. Look there and you'll find all the stuff. How about yourself, Ilya? Where can people find you?
You can find me
in a minute or less.
You can find me at Hot Rod Cameras, hotrodcameras.com. Let's thank some people. Let's thank our incredible producer and editor, Alana Cody. Thank you so much for putting this show together. Let's thank Kays Elatrachi. Kays did all the music that you heard in this show. And, without him, we would be a very silent, boring show.
Very, very silent and boring. Yeah, and did you mention Alana's editing the show as well?
I did. I said she's producing and editing the show, which is great.
I just wanted to triple underline it because I know how much work that is. Hey, Ilya, you want to take us out?
Thanks for tuning in.
This has been the Cinematography Podcast, presented by Hot Rod Cameras. Find your next camera, lens, or accessory on the web at hotrodcameras.com. Don't forget to subscribe to our show on iTunes and connect with us on Facebook and Twitter. Thanks for listening.